Starship was never supposed to land here. SpaceX just revealed a plan that skips Mechazilla completely. Hidden inside an FAA document, 3 secret zones: Hawaii, Alaska, California, South America, no tower, no catch arms. Here's the twist. This isn't just a backup plan. It's a whole new recovery network SpaceX has been building in silence, and it changes everything about how Starship comes home. Let's break it down. For years, one image has defined Starship: a giant steel rocket falling out of the sky, caught by 2 mechanical arms at the last second. It looks impossible every single time. SpaceX built its entire reputation on making that impossible catch feel routine, but almost nobody asks the obvious question. What happens the one time it doesn't work? Not because the rocket fails, because something outside SpaceX's control gets in the way. A storm rolling in over the Gulf, a sensor glitch on the tower, a ship that wandered too close to the exclusion zone. In that split second, Starship isn't landing near Starbase anymore. It's still coming down. Somewhere. That single fact changes everything. A rocket that can only land in one place isn't a transportation system. It's an experiment with a very expensive single point of failure. SpaceX knows it. So while the world was watching the catch attempts, a second story was being written inside government paperwork. Not in a press conference, not in an Elon Musk post. Inside an FAA environmental review, buried under technical language most people would scroll straight past. That document is the reason you're watching this video. What the FAA quietly revealed. The filing is called a Draft Tiered Environmental Assessment. It sounds boring on purpose. Government documents are supposed to sound boring, but inside it is a map showing something SpaceX has never announced on stage. 3 separate zones across the Pacific Ocean, each one large enough to safely bring down a vehicle the size of a skyscraper. The first sits around Hawaii, covering water to the southwest, east, and southeast of the islands. The second stretches across the northeastern Pacific, off the coast of California, curving up past Oregon toward Alaska and the Aleutian Islands. The third sits far to the south, off the coast of South America. Now, the detail that should stop you. These aren't new. Versions of these same zones have shown up in earlier SpaceX environmental filings too. This isn't a rushed reaction to a recent scare. It's a plan that's been sitting in the pipeline, growing more detailed for longer than most people realize. And that timing is exactly what makes the next part make sense. To understand why these zones exist, you need to understand where Starship is actually headed next. Every Starship test flight so far has ended the same way. A controlled splashdown in the Indian Ocean, thousands of miles from the nearest coastline. That's not an accident. That stretch of ocean gives SpaceX room to run through the checklist that matters right now. Releasing payloads, coasting in space, relighting engines, testing how the ship survives the heat of re-entry. For a vehicle still proving itself, the Indian Ocean is the perfect isolated test bench. But that phase is temporary. Once Starship starts flying complete orbital missions instead of these partial hops, the flight path changes completely. Instead of dropping into the Indian Ocean, the ship will circle almost the entire planet and come back toward North America from across the Pacific. Think of the return path like a long, final approach to an airport runway. Except this runway is Starbase in Texas, or eventually Kennedy Space Center in Florida. And every long, final approach needs somewhere safe to divert to if the primary runway isn't available. That's exactly what these 3 Pacific zones are. Diversion points positioned directly under the path a fully orbital Starship will fly on its way home. One more detail matters here. These zones aren't random shapes on a map. They sit far from shipping lanes, far from populated coastlines, far from commercial flight corridors. That's not caution for its own sake. It's SpaceX designing an abort plan that assumes something will eventually go wrong and making sure the fallout lands somewhere with nobody underneath it. Why one landing site was never going to be enough. Most coverage of this story stops right here, but the reasoning behind this decision says something bigger about how SpaceX operates. Every high-frequency transportation system in history runs into the same wall. Airlines don't rely on a single airport. Cargo shipping doesn't rely on a single port. The moment your entire operation depends on one location being available, your growth is capped by that location's worst day, not its best one. Starbase is remarkable, but it's still one tower in one location with one set of catch arms. Weather delays happen, maintenance happens. A previous flight's debris field can shut down operations for days. If SpaceX wants Starship flying every few days, and eventually, by their own stated ambitions, multiple times a day, betting everything on one tower isn't just risky. It's mathematically impossible to scale. This isn't really a story about an emergency backup plan. It's a story about capacity, about what it takes to turn a rocket into an airline. Commercial aviation didn't become reliable the day the first jet engine worked. It became reliable the day airlines stopped depending on a single runway per route and started building networks, alternate airports, diversion fields, backup fuel stops. Nobody remembers those decisions because they happened quietly, in regulatory filings, years before passengers noticed the difference. That's the exact stage Starship is at right now. The public watches catch attempts. Regulators see network design, and network design is what determines whether a transportation system survives contact with reality. The story takes a turn, most coverage completely missed. Emergency landing zones only solve half the problem. Splashing down safely in open ocean doesn't mean the mission is over. It means a 200-foot stainless steel spacecraft is now floating alone thousands of miles from the nearest launch site. Something has to go get it. This is where SpaceX's next move gets genuinely interesting. Earlier this year, reports surfaced that just read the instructions. One of SpaceX's existing Falcon 9 drone ships was being modified, not for Falcon 9, for Starship-related development. SpaceX never explained exactly what that meant. There are really only two possibilities, and both are ambitious. Possibility 1. SpaceX builds a much larger version of the drone ship it already operates, strong enough to support Starship's landing legs directly on deck. This sounds almost simple compared to what's coming next, but it isn't a throwaway idea. Landing legs are already coming back for a different reason entirely. The Moon and Mars don't have catch towers waiting. Any Starship variant headed to another world needs legs no matter what. A reinforced ocean platform could become the Earth-based proving ground for exactly that hardware. Possibility 2 should genuinely surprise you. Instead of legs, SpaceX puts an actual catch tower on the drone ship itself, a floating Mechazilla. The same arms that grab Starship at Starbase, except now able to sail wherever the mission needs it, instead of waiting for the mission to come home. If that's the real plan, SpaceX isn't just building a backup landing zone. They're building a mobile version of their most advanced piece of hardware, one that could, in theory, meet Starship almost anywhere on Earth. The engineering problem nobody has solved yet. Before this starts sounding like science fiction, it's worth being honest about the difficulty involved. A catch tower on land is already an engineering feat. It has to align two massive steel arms with a descending rocket falling at speed with millimeter-level precision, while the rocket itself adjusts position in real time. Now put that exact challenge on a platform that's floating, rolling with the swell, pushed sideways by wind, rising and falling with every wave underneath it. Falcon 9 boosters already land on drone ships, but those are smaller vehicles landing on legs. A far more forgiving problem than threading a rocket into two moving arms on a moving deck. This is, without exaggeration, one of the hardest maritime engineering problems anyone in the space industry has proposed solving. If SpaceX pulls it off, it becomes the single most difficult recovery method any launch company has ever operated. So, which version is real? Is SpaceX building the floating catch tower right now, or is the drone ship upgrade something simpler? Legs, not arms, with the harder version still years out. Nobody outside SpaceX knows for certain. That uncertainty alone is reason enough to keep watching the story over the next year. Before writing off the floating catch tower as pure speculation, remember something. SpaceX has already pulled off the impossible-sounding version of this exact idea once before, and people doubted that too. Landing an orbital-class booster on a drone ship in the middle of the ocean, on autopilot in rough seas, was considered borderline absurd when SpaceX first attempted it. Multiple early landings ended in explosions on the deck. Outside engineers openly questioned whether it could ever work reliably. Today, a Falcon 9 landing barely makes news. That track record matters. It doesn't guarantee the floating Mechazilla concept works. But betting against SpaceX solving a maritime precision landing problem has historically been a losing bet. What's different this time is scale. Starship stands roughly as tall as a 30-story building. The margin for error on a catch tower is measured in inches, not feet. A platform absorbing ocean swell while holding that kind of precision is harder than anything Falcon 9 ever demanded. So the fair way to frame this isn't SpaceX will definitely pull this off. It's Space is one of the only companies on Earth that could plausibly attempt it at all. Why competitors aren't even close. Every advantage in this plan comes with a price. And the price here is the one thing SpaceX built its entire brand on: speed, recovering Starship. Hundreds, maybe thousands of miles offshore doesn't just solve a landing problem. It creates a transportation problem. Falcon 9 boosters already take 2 to 5 days just to sail back from a drone ship landing, and those are small compared to Starship. Stretch that logistics chain further. SpaceX doesn't currently operate a dedicated Starship launch site on the West Coast. A Pacific splashdown near California or Hawaii doesn't just mean sailing home. It could mean routing through the Panama Canal or offloading in California and trucking the ship overland just to reach Texas or Florida. None of that lines up with a company that wants to launch daily. Every day spent moving a recovered ship across an ocean is a day it isn't refueling for the next flight. That's the tension sitting at the center of this whole story. Mechazilla is fast but fragile. One tower, one location, one point of failure. Ocean recovery is durable but slow, flexible at the cost of time. SpaceX isn't choosing between the two. Based on everything in this filing, they're building both because a network that bends beats a fast system that breaks. Look at the pattern SpaceX has followed since the very first Falcon 9 landing. Step 1, land a booster on a drone ship. Step 2, land boosters on solid ground at dedicated landing zones. Step 3, catch an entire booster out of the sky with mechanical arms. Each step didn't replace the one before it. It stacked another layer of resilience on top. Starship is following the identical pattern, except the layers are stacking faster than they ever did with Falcon 9. Mechazilla hasn't even become fully routine yet, and the ocean recovery layer is already being engineered in parallel behind the scenes. Compare that to where the rest of the industry stands. Several competitors across multiple countries are still working to master a single reliable landing method, getting one rocket down in one piece consistently without exploding. That's still the finish line for most of the industry. For SpaceX, a single working landing method was the finish line years ago. What they're building now is a logistics network, multiple recovery methods, multiple locations, each one covering the other's weaknesses. That's a fundamentally different problem to solve. The gap between SpaceX and everyone else isn't measured in rockets landed anymore. It's measured in how many different ways they've already prepared for the landing to go wrong. So, back to the question this video opened with. What happens if Starship can't make it back to Starbase? That question was answered a long time ago quietly, without a keynote or a live stream. The 3 Pacific zones aren't a contingency tucked away for a bad day. They're infrastructure. A required layer underneath the version of Starship SpaceX has always said it wants to build. One that flies constantly, recovers reliably, and never lets a single point of failure decide whether the next launch happens on schedule. The floating drone ship possibility pushes that idea one step further than almost anyone expected. Not a backup location, a mobile version of Mechazilla itself, able to go wherever the mission needs it instead of waiting for the mission to come home. Every time SpaceX has looked like it was solving one problem, the real story turned out to be 3 problems solved ahead of schedule. The Pacific zones look like an emergency plan. What they actually are is a preview of the next 5 years of Starship. And if that drone ship upgrade turns out to be a floating catch tower, that preview just got a lot more interesting. The math behind this network is still unfolding, and that's the story worth tracking. Thanks for watching. I'm Adrian. Like, share, comment, and subscribe to The Space Brief. More analysis waiting right there.